Welcome to Top Advisor Marketing, where you will learn how to become a prolific online influencer, attract more ideal clients, and grow your practice. Brought to you by Top Advisor Podcasting, a done-for-you podcasting solution built just for trusted advisors. And now, your co-hosts of Top Advisor Marketing, Kirk Lowe and Matt Halloran.
Hello and welcome to another Top Advisor Marketing podcast. Today, we are going to talk to somebody who thinks like us, who does stuff like us, and has actually had success doing those things. Now, that might sound strange, but my guest today is Jason Pereira. Now, if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, you need to, because he is all over the place. He is an award-winning financial planner. He's a portfolio manager. He's an entrepreneur, lecturer, FinTech expert, writer, host, and podcaster. He's been on TV. He does it all, right? Which is magnificent. And we're going to dive into kind of the brass tacks, everybody, because I want everybody to understand that it's not just theory that we bring onto these podcasts. We bring on people who actually do the marketing and allow themselves to truly get their name, rise above the noise, and be their own loud and really build their business. So, Jason, welcome to the show, my friend.
All right, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Now,
let's start at the beginning, because here's the thing that I want everybody to understand is you're actually a pretty darn young guy. You have super amounts of alphabet soup after your name, and you are in Toronto, but you do stuff somewhat in the US. Is that correct?
A little bit everywhere.
A little bit everywhere. Good.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your journey. So obviously you are a student of being a student because, okay, so I just want everybody, I'm going to read these off. MBA, he's got his master's degree. CFA, which very few of you have. CFP, which a good amount of you have. RFP, TEP, FC, SI, and CIWM. Now, some of those are American, some of those are not. But let's talk about, first off, your journey and being a student. What makes you so fiercely passionate about financial services and continuing to sharpen your tools?
I'll go back, and those are actually kind of two separate answers. The first one goes back to how I landed in this industry in the first place. I basically, when I was in high school, decided that I didn't want to go off to university with no idea what I wanted to do for a living and blow a bunch of money in an area that I didn't want to work in. There was a co-op program at my high school, and I went in and said, hey, I'm interested in a couple of things. And the stock market was one of them, because of course I was a teenage boy who thought money was awesome. Just so happened I got placed with one of the largest brokers in the country right in downtown Toronto. And that turned from a co-op position doing some filing and basic admin to a summer position to a comeback anytime you have time off work, and we will happily put you to work, and you can do projects on the side if you want, and we'll happily pay you for them. Literally went through high school, through university, and had a job afterwards. And during that time, I did a little bit of everything. Graduated from administration onto a little bit of the advisor marketing, to financial planning generation, performance review generation, research, you name it. And by the end of it, I discovered that I really did not like the broker-dealer world in Canada. It was all about targets to be hit by the advisor and not actually measuring success in the life of the client and the impact there. But while I was there, I was fortunate enough to spend a bunch of time doing financial planning and seeing how impactful that was. And when I finally left there and got on my own, I realized, you know what? I actually don't know how to run a financial planning practice. And I actually only have a brief or subtle understanding of financial planning in general. And that led me on a never-ending pursuit of continued self-improvement and depth of knowledge. And it's the old saying that the person who the true hallmark of knowledge is knowing that you know nothing. There isn't a single year where I don't try to improve my depth of knowledge in something related to this field. And it's largely because I found my passion. My passion is helping people live the biggest and the best and fullest version of their lives. Every time I encounter something that I don't have experience in, I at least try to understand to what level I don't have experience in and how to solve problems. So I'm never going to become the deepest expert in the most extraneous little thing when it comes to this industry, but I'm going to know enough about where to shoot and where not to shoot. I also had this personal goal of like, I always found it weird when certain people felt that once they finished school, they were done getting educated. Like, oh, I'm done school. I'll never have to worry about this stuff again. As if you learned everything you need to know in school. It makes no sense. So I committed myself to like one course per year, and you compound that over time, and this is the end result.
Well, I love, and I absolutely 100% agree with you. The more I study anything, the more I realize that, man, I just flat out don't know crap on the grand scheme of things.
Mhm.
I love learning. I actively, as you do, when somebody says something, I'm not the kind of person who's going to take everything at face value. I want to know more, right? I mean, the opportunity for growth that we have, whether it's, practically, philosophically, from our actual profession, spiritually, whatever, it really is a never ending way to continue to stretch yourself and learn. And because of your level of education and continuously educating yourself, you use media to talk about how you help people live their best life. So let's just dive right in. Where did you start with media?
Good question. I will go back and credit a professor of mine a well-known gentleman by the name of Moshe Milevsky, who's one of the foremost experts on longevity planning in the world, as well as a number of other financial topics and best-selling author. I took one of his courses as the last course in my MBA, and I turned in my term paper. He actually emailed me personally afterwards saying how much he enjoyed it and thought it was excellent. To which the brash young individual that I turned around and said, well, if you think it's that good, help me get it published. To which he coyly replied, it's not ready for academia, but here's the editor of one of the bigger periodicals for advisors in Canada. Mm-hmm. So he sent me over to him. That turned into me getting a column with them. And then that eventually led to more people discovering me and going into different areas of media. It's a compounding effect, right? The more you become seen as an expert and the more people can find you online as an expert in various areas, the more likely you are to be called upon as an expert.
Yes. A lot of us started with writing. I remember before I started podcasting or shooting video or really doing anything, I had an article in Horse's Mouth, which is still just an amazing publication. And I have it framed on my wall, which led me to being in Investment News, Financial Planning Magazine, RIA Biz, and the same sort of stuff that you've been able to do here because you have used that to gain momentum. Now, you have gained more and more momentum. So let's stay on the column, the writing thing. Is this something that you truly enjoy and that you have a passion for? Or is it just something that you're good enough at that it's a great way to get eyeballs?
Well, it's definitely the former, but I will say this much, that it comes a lot of times out of passion. And I will always say that I understand why Hemingway became a drunk every time I try to write something, because I actually find writing painful, right? I actually find the act of trying to formulate my thoughts into a cohesive 900-word article, which is what most of these newspapers want, painful. So that's the first piece. Now, I have less pain when it comes to writing longer form 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 word diatribes that tend to prove rather popular. And I say that I have less pain there because I'm able to express myself and get on more detail. So to me, a lot of my writing is fueled by either opportunity, that I see something that I feel other people haven't written about, because I'm not one for typically writing about the next top 10 list that's been done to death a million times. I prefer to no one's talking about this. Let me address it. A lot of it I say is fueled by either opportunity or rage. So opportunity in that no one's done it. And therefore, I think it's a value and people need to look at it from this perspective. Or, oh my God, I can't believe the other thing that got written about this, or the general belief or the marketing of whatever X thing is. And this is how fundamentally flawed the thinking is, and just tearing it down piece by piece. Call it peer review work is a good chunk of what I do, but a lot of it is more so I'd say that's constructive criticism as peer review, but a lot of it is also just like, what is it that is not being discussed? And I often get cited, especially in my country, where the thinking of, I will say in the industry, is generally behind that of the US, for writing about things that no one else is touching and talking about areas and issues that no one else is basically going to, because it's not the easy low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. We call that pick a fight within our system, is finding ideas, philosophies, products, or services that are fundamentally against who you are and what you believe, and then writing commentary surrounding that. In our case, either that's social media or a podcast. Now, you opened a can of worms here, and I wasn't planning on going in this direction, but you just said something that I love, which is talking about something nobody is talking about. What aren't advisors talking about right now, whether that's in Canada or in the US, that has gotten you fired up, man?
I wouldn't say it's in the US. I feel like there's a lot of really honest discourse and dialogue in the US. And there's a lot more, okay, population's 10x roughly. You have more media periodicals for getting this stuff out there. You have a bigger history of evidence-based investing and platforms and whatnot. And there's a fiduciary responsibility, which just probably goes back to the core, at least on the RA side, which goes back to the core about why many of these conversations are being had. It's because if you're holding yourself to that kind of standard, then you have to be bluntly honest about where it's in violation or not. In Canada, we don't have that. We don't have we have one tiny segment of the market that technically has a fiduciary responsibility, but we don't have a robust RA network. We don't have a journal. We have a couple of periodicals that do publish specific advisor content, but more often than not, we're still focused on like stuff you guys would have been seeing 10, 20 years ago. It's like tips on sales practices. I often shudder sometimes as some of these articles get published because what passes for research is abysmal. Or just simple example is, how is the best way to take advantage of this one account that's designed for education funding? You have these 3 different funding patterns and I'm going to test them all at 5% rates of return. That's it. Like, that's it. I'm sitting there going, like, the academic side of my brain is going, what about every other possible return pattern? What about every other funding pattern? What about the sensitivity to this, that, and the other thing? Like how many things are we're oversimplifying to the point where people are thinking this is a valid research piece when it's completely flawed, right? Or I've written many articles about the need for fiduciary responsibility in this country. I wrote an article over 10 years ago about the need for banning of embedded compensation in my country, which, by the way, most of our mutual funds get sold on the equivalent of a USB unit. A lot of people just cringed listening to this. And that took over 10 years before it got banned. I was being called out on stage in conferences as being a ASSHOLE for having even written that. Luckily, we've gone so far as that's no longer why people call me that. They call me that for other things. And one of the more, I'll tell you, the most popular article I wrote all year was, and I'm sure you guys have one of these down there. I know you have one of these down there called Wealthfront. We have a robo-advisor in Canada and discount broker in Canada that just basically pays for marketing to just says, don't pay, why are you paying an advisor? You're getting hosed. Like they attack advisors on every front. Now, don't get me wrong. I have pointed out a number of the things that they have said, which are absolutely true, and they're black eyes, and they absolutely need to be pointed out. But they've gone so far to the point of just eliminating the concept of value and advice altogether, and how flawed that is. So I did an entire piece on like why their brand promise and how flawed it was, and the disassociation or the denial of value when it comes to advice, and just, for lack of a better term, tore them a polite new a-hole. And at the end of it, I did a follow-up saying, look, I'm not arguing for their destruction. I actually think that they play a vital part in options for Canadian consumers. I'm arguing for a better version of them and a more honest version of them that actually recognizes that it's not the quick 30-second commercial, get your attention truth that they're putting out there. That got me a lot of thank you emails for a small blog that I do not pay enough attention to, quite honestly. Got easily, I think it's over 10,000 page views for just that one publication, right? So those are the kind of things that I pick fights on, is when I think that people, when I think the industry or the consumer in general is being misguided or being misled for the self-gratification of individuals or individual companies.
Let's talk about television and video. How much video do you do right now?
Not a ton of it. I mean, I am not the conventional person to go on the financial news media, right? I get these calls from time to time where like, we want you to come in and talk about your top 10, stock picks. I'm like, I don't do that. I don't do that. And I talk to them like, let's talk about why that's flawed, right? And then let's talk about where people need to spend their time and the fundamentals of financial planning and this stuff. And they humor me and they're like, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Let me just give you some thought. And I never hear back from them. So that's not what I get a lot of. I get occasional opportunities to come in and speak on a certain topic. If you're not out there talking about how to make a quick buck, the new television media is typically not interested. Now, what I do have access to, and I have started, is a small cable network, as basically who I know the owners of. They asked me to put together a show on financial literacy, even though I tend to basically cater to a very affluent client base with very complex planning needs. That's kind of like the joke. Complexity is my wheelhouse. It makes me happy. It's a very, very basic, fundamental, like we talk about one topic per day. I'm a talking head for about 10 minutes. I interview somebody else to add color to the entire situation. But we talk about one fundamental thing that people need to know. That does not have a lot of reach on the cable channel, but you recycle that in YouTube and like anything else. I mean, the great thing about video, and here's a secret tip for marketing for people out there. Video is actually multiple formats if you do it right. You take the video and you put it on YouTube and you put it on your website. You can repurpose the audio if it's done a certain way for podcasts. You can get a transcript done of the podcast and makes it searchable on Google, because Google doesn't do a great job of searching audio. Frankly, you can take that one piece and you can slice and dice it, and you can take out quotes, and you can take out video clips of 1 30-second video clip of this one point I made and use that and just recycle it. And what was a 1 hour investment to make it happen can become countless hours worth of media for other people to consume and discover you with.
And that's what we do for a living here. So it feels like a great commercial for, because that's exactly, we take the podcast and we chop it up into lots and lots and lots of little bits and turn it into more searchable stuff and make the advisors sound and experts sound super wicked smart, put it in multiple media things. Now, okay. So writing, you got your cable television thing. Now let's talk about podcasting, because you have produced a pretty substantial amount of these. Why in God's name did you start doing that on top of everything else?
I have 2 podcasts, and combined, they're just shy of 200 episodes. Actually, the first one just passes, it's 150th, just aired as we record this. I've always loved podcasting ever since I discovered it. And I consume more podcasts and audiobooks than most people will consume books in their lifetime already. I've always been one to not be an also ran. I couldn't figure out an angle for how my normal business would be translatable to a podcast. So I never went there, but I always wanted to kind of do one. And then what happened was I got involved in the FinTech industry in Toronto quite heavily. That all happened because as Toronto started to blow up as a FinTech hub, which is one of the top, probably 4 FinTech hubs in the world, and probably the number 1 AI hub in the world at this point, I started reaching out to a lot of these companies and saying, hey, I would love if you guys were looking to do some sort of platform that allowed me to use your technology as an advisor. They'd always be like, how'd you find me? And I'd reply, well, first name at url.com. All you tech people are the same thing. And they laughed at that. And then they'd be like, wait a sec, you're under the age of 60. You understand how technology works. You can use a computer. You're talking to me about other players in the game. You're talking about integration plays that can make, can we meet for coffee? And the next thing you knew, I had this network of FinTech professionals in the city. And it was an interesting time because it was still early on. So a lot of advisors had a tremendous amount of animosity towards FinTech because they saw them as a bunch of know-nothing 20-somethings basically working in their parents' basement trying to steal their livelihoods. But meanwhile, there was a major disconnect. These companies were looking to collaborate a lot of times with advisors, but couldn't even get a dialogue started. And what happened was I would just start correcting people's misconceptions in conversation. And sooner or later, people started saying, we were thinking about having someone talk about FinTech at this conference. Would you be willing to speak? And the next thing you know, without trying, I had booked like 3 speaking gigs. And I was like, okay, I think I found something. And you know what? Maybe there's something here in terms of a podcast. So I listened to the podcasts that existed out there. Essentially what I found was that all of the FinTech podcasts tended to be, at the time, consultants who were talking about Fortune 500 deployments, largely as a commercial for their services. And I said, there's no one actually looking at what is happening on the ground floor. Like, who are the players out there? What is the impact they're having in the space? And just letting them tell their own story. And that's where the idea for FinTech Impact came from. That's 150 episodes in now. It is top 2 or 3, depending on where you look on what podcast outlet in the world. It's a very small pond. The success is measured in hundreds and thousands, not in hundreds of thousands. But it has also opened up board positions, consulting opportunities, speaking engagements, all kinds of things. So I have become probably the most recognizable name in FinTech in the country at this point when it comes to independent experts. The US, there's much more competition in the US. I do show up on some radars, just not a ton of them. The second one is entitled Financial Planning for Canadian Business Owners. And that one came from, I was actually listening to Michael Kitces' podcast, which I refer to as the gold standard in our industry. Someone talked about how they developed their business specifically with a financial planning for business for business owners of a certain type within a certain region. Like it was like in one state. And I'm like, is anyone doing this in Canada? And I looked it up. I'm like, oh my God, no one is. Right. Like that was perfect. I basically took that over, named it exactly what it is. And since then, that one's about less than 40 episodes in, but already garnered some business from it. So it's been great for just getting my name out there as an expert in countless fields. And even if it doesn't bring in the prospect, sometimes it doesn't bring in sometimes it brings in prospects. Other times I get nothing from it. But when prospects discover that is something you're doing, the validity of who you are just goes through the roof. Like suddenly your credibility factor just got a plus 10 easily.
Well, and everything, and since you've got this complete package, right? You've got all of the media covered, your credibility is gone through the roof. But I have to ask this question because, I mean, I'm sure our listeners are sitting there right now going, how in the hell does this guy have enough time to still manage portfolios and be a financial planner? How do you balance all of this, Jason?
Well, I'm not going to lie. The juggle is always a struggle, right? But the reality is, and I have this conversation quite frequently, let's look at what a successful advisor is considered in many cases. A lot of times, a lot of advisors get to the stage where they've got their between 50 to 100 households, making their business successful. And they get their business systemized and streamlined to the point where they're not working 5 days a week anymore. They're working 3 to 4. It's not uncommon in our industry. In fact, it's a goal for a lot of advisors in our industry is to limit the amount of time they spend at work. The difference between them and me is that I tend, instead of consuming that for leisure, which I don't give myself enough time for that, I tend to consume it with other passion projects. And those passion projects end up typically feeding back into the core business. The reality is that with the client base I have, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's times where I got to work late and I've got a week where I'm just completely slammed. But in reality, if I was to do this, if I was to weigh it out, I'd say my core job takes between 3 to 4 days a week, leaving me between 1 to 2 days a week for everything else. Also, delegate everything, systemize, and simplify. As you can tell, I'm a technophile. I have found many very, very powerful technology tools to just very simply implement and make my life easier and faster and more efficient.
Well, let's close today's podcast by talking about some of the things that you outsource and delegate. What are some of the things that you've outsourced and delegate to make that so that you are really staying in your lane and being much more productive doing what you should be doing instead of what you shouldn't?
Yeah. So let's define what I should be doing versus what I shouldn't, right? So the core business, what I should be doing is spending time with my clients, helping them live a better life. That's basically it. Now, all the heavy lifting involved with that, which is everything from the financial plan generation to the investment management stuff and just the administration, has in large part been delegated out. Like I still have decisions on where the people are going in terms of investment. I have a associate planner who does most of all the, we'll call it the straightforward plans. I get involved in the complex planning cases, but he's trained up to handle a big chunk of that work. The reality is that starts first and foremost with my team. I've got a business partner. I've got 4 staff members. Between that support system, they handle the day-to-day heavy lifting, leaving me to the client relationship side and kind of the leadership thinking in terms of where the business should go and the constant iteration tweaking of the machine, right? So that took a long time to get there, and it's still not perfect, and we're in the middle of an overhaul right now. So it's getting better over time, and in a year's time, I'll even have, fingers crossed, more free time to spend on making it all work better. But it's like Kaizen, it's continuous self-improvement to make that better. The podcasting, we outsource the podcast. Like I record them, I put them in a Dropbox folder, and then all production, everything else gets taken care of for me. My associate handles the posting and everything else, and the social media posts. Even the marketing of my business, a lot of it gets automated. There's social media marketing automation platforms like I'll plug AdvisorStream here, which handle a lot of the social media stuff I do, except for the stuff when you see me make very cynical comments or funny comments. That's all pure me. But a lot of it comes down to just focusing on the inner human, like the human aspect of this, right? Like I should be spending my time with people. Once I get don't get me wrong, there's a certain level of due diligence on the investment stuff that always has to be done. And that can be largely read and garnered through newsletters, quite honestly. Spending time with people and reading should be where I spend the vast bulk of my time.
Amen, brother. Well, that was perfect. Thank you for walking us through all of those different components of how you have been able to balance. And in not saying that you're 100% always in balance, because by your own admission that you're not, but that you have outsourced a lot of different pieces, how you're using your writing, video, and also podcasting to help get your name out there and grow your business. Jason, is there any passing words of wisdom that you think that people here in the States or in Canada need to pay attention to for this coming up year?
I'll go back to the term Kaizen. I think my life has been defined by always trying to be a little bit better every morning, right? I think you're not going to win that battle every day, but it's the old saying about you underestimate what you can accomplish in a year, but you overestimate what you can accomplish in a day, right? Or I flip that backwards. So you always think you get more done in a day, but incrementally, you get more and more and more. Like I didn't start, no one birthed me into the level that I'm at now. This is all the culmination of 20 years in the industry to get the business to where it is, taking at least one course per year. And don't get me wrong, there were moments where I'm just like studying and wondering to myself, why am I doing this to myself? And you shut that little voice up and you push forward. Compound that, and suddenly I've got more credentials that you can count. You compound the client growth, and suddenly you have the ability to focus a lot of hours on a small subset of people and make the money you want to make. You build the team that you need. You get you take advantage of the opportunities when they're presented to you. You start with one thing. I didn't started with writing, and then I got into podcasting, I got into television, right? So they all feed into each other over time. And the goal should be with each of them. If you start something, figure it out the widget, make it efficient, focus, spend the time that is necessary on those things, and then pass off the rest to someone else. And you will find time to do ever more over time.
Jason, thank you so much for your wisdom and really giving an inside look on how you can be truly productive and get your voice out into the marketplace, rise above the noise, and truly be your own loud by using different media, using one single point of media, like you talked about with the TV or the podcast, and turn it into a whole bunch of different posts. AdvisorStream happens to be a good friend of ours here at Top Advisor Marketing. We love them. We think they do great work. If you guys don't know who they are, please make sure that you look them up. AdvisorStream.
Full disclosure, I'm an advisor to the company, so I'm not paid to plug, but yes.
I'm not paid to plug by them. I just think that they're really freaking awesome guys. Their whole team is wonderful there. And I really, really do like what they do. And we've actually had them on the podcast 2 or 3 times. So go back and search in our channel, AdvisorStream, and you guys will be able to find it. So Jason, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Matt.
If you have not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you click that subscribe now button below. That way, every time we come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. If you have any podcast topic ideas or guest ideas, all you have to do is email me, matt@topadvisorm.com. And if you think that you can just utilize your voice about 3 hours a month and talk about the things that you're really, truly passionate about, and then do what Jason talked about, which is hand it off to other people to help them build your social media, please give us a holler or email me or follow me on LinkedIn. So for Jason and everybody here at Top Advisor, this is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.
Are you ready to change the way you communicate with your clients? Are you tired of being the best kept secret in your area? Learn how to become a prolific online influencer, attract more ideal clients, and grow your business. Contact us today and see what the power of podcasting can do for your business. Click on the Contact Us link on our website at topadvisormarketing.com and set up a call to learn more. Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook for more updates and information.
This was brought to you by Iris.xyz, a platform helping financial professionals become better in business and life through new media and new voices. Visit them and learn more at iris.xyz.